Welcome once again to Dialogue on Public Issues. I'm John Chowney with Campbellsville University. We thank you, our loyal audience, for your favorable comments out in the community and for being with us once again. I'm very pleased to be interviewing today and hosting Dr. Nathl Moore. Dr. Moore is pastor of First African Baptist Church in Lexington. He has been a guest a year or two ago, and I received many positive comments from out in the community about that interview. Dr. Moore, welcome back.
Dr. Chowney, thank you for having me back.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a native of Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay.
I am the oldest of two. I have a younger brother, 3 years younger than I. My parents is Harold and Dolores Moore. And so, again, with Huntsville being my Alabama being my hometown, roll tide. But it's good to be here. I had to get that in. But no, Huntsville is my hometown.
Okay.
Graduate of Tuskegee University.
Yes, very historic university.
Very much so. And so that's where I did my undergrad work in computer science. And so that's a bit of my background from where I
Now, how did you go from computer science to the gospel ministry?
Definitely the divine call.
Okay.
I wish there was a great story to go along with it, other than it had to be a divine call of God to take me away from the computer science industry and some of the money that was attached to that at the time. But truly a divine call. The call of God to enter into the gospel ministry really is what moved me from.
You worked for several years, didn't you?
I did. I worked for about
industry?
5.
Okay.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I worked for a company called Ethicon Endosurgery. It was a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so that's where I started after graduating from school. They recruited me from Tuskegee, and so that's where I began my professional career. And it was in the midst of that time in the Cincinnati area that the Lord began to confirm for me my call into the ministry. And so that's
Did you ever resist a little bit, or try to negotiate along that call?
In all honesty, yes.
Most of us have.
In all honesty, yes. If I had heeded the call when I really realized that the Lord was really calling me, I would have definitely entered into ministry sooner. But I thank the Lord for the journey that I did go on to arrive to the answering of the call, because it taught me more about myself.
Sure.
And the dependency that I had in certain areas of my life to say, if you're gonna follow the call, you got to be committed to God first.
Certainly.
And so there were some dynamics that were in play that needed to take place to get me to that place in life. And so all of that was part of the wonderful journey that I went on.
You're married, 4 children?
That is correct. Married with 4 children. Wife Evelyn, the former Evelyn Faye Scott of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
We met while I was in school at Tuskegee. My father likes to tease me all the time with the tuition that he paid at Tuskegee and in ministry and not computer science. He teases my wife and lets her know that she was a very expensive bride.
And 4 children, all adults at this point, I believe.
That is correct. That is correct. All adults now, and the youngest is a senior in college, and so hopefully she'll be finishing that up here in the very near future. Yes.
Now, how long have you been at First African Baptist Church in Lexington?
We just celebrated 9 years this past October. It doesn't feel like 9 years. It's been a good ride thus far, but I've been there for 9 years.
Now, your church's congregation is very historic. Tell us a little bit about the history and how long, when it was founded, and kind of the very rich history of First African Baptist Church.
It does. First African shares a very rich history. Our founding pastor, founding father, is a gentleman by the name of Peter, or Captain Durrett. He was a slave in the area of Virginia. He traveled with a group of settlers coming from the Virginia area. History has it that he helped to lead them in coming into the Lexington vicinity. And so back in late 1780s, once arriving there, he actually then did move further into Lexington, where he met one of Lexington's fathers, John Maxwell, and who provided him space on his property, where he built a log cabin. And from that log cabin, he began to continue his preaching ministry. And that's where the church was birthed in that 1790 period. And so, again, with those roots, we today we even build on that history to propel us into present-day ministry. So, that 1790 and the work of Old Captain, we're still here.
That's a rich history.
Yes.
And a lot of amazing things in the history, I'm sure.
Yes.
In the course of the history of the church. Not all easy. I'm sure were struggles along the way.
Yes.
But nonetheless, a very rich and history of resilient people.
Yes, yes, most definitely. From him to our second pastor, London Farrell, his noted fame is that during the cholera epidemic of the early mid to 1800s there in the Lexington area, he and another pastor is known as having stayed while others left. So he was known as a pastor who gave of himself. History says in the records that he ministered them to sickness and then unfortunately buried them in death. But that's what he's known for. And then our third pastor was also instrumental during the Civil War era and time framing. And so, and then our fourth pastor, James Monroe, picked up from there. And so we've kind of built our current ministry model on our first four pastors. Each one of those brought a different kind of pastoral dynamic to the church. And so we strategically use our history to really propel us in what we're doing now.
How many pastors has the church had?
I'm the 14th.
Okay.
Yes.
Which that in itself means that most of the pastors have stayed a lengthy period of time.
Yes, for the most part. Of all of that history, my two predecessors have had the most lengthy pastoral stays with the church. My predecessor to my predecessor, Dr. Homer Nutter, who some around the state still remembers, was with the church for 50 years.
Wow.
And then my predecessor, Dr. McIntyre, was with the congregation, Leon McIntyre was with the congregation for 33 and a half years.
Yeah.
And so
those are remarkable tenures.
It is, and it's interesting also to be within the congregation where I still have members who remembers being baptized by Dr. Nutter, over 80, so with Dr. Nutter and Dr. McIntyre still to be with me.
I'm in my 25th year at the church I pastor on here in Taylor County, and which is I'm the longest tenured Baptist minister, at least in this community, and I think of someone serving 50 years. To me, that's just amazing.
Yes.
And a positive thing.
Yes.
Because there's a richness and deepness, a depth to ministry when you stay for an extended period, I think.
Yes.
And you can actually say, I've been here amongst the generations of people.
Most definitely. Definitely.
Now, what are some of the primary ministries in 2018 at First African Church?
We're working on some things, developing some things. We just a year ago embraced a 7-year model for congregational outreach or church growth, and so we're into year 2 of that particular vision. And so we're still in the process of really developing some of those ministries that we want to be active with. Currently, we do some things as far as with our local school. We have a local elementary school, Booker T. Washington, is in our community, and we do an annual what we call a challenge between the men and women of our church. We do the hand sanitizer Kleenex drive, and so it's in that January Super Bowl time frame. So we use that as a good rally time to see who can bring the most Kleenex or the most hand sanitizer. So we do some things of that nature, and we also do an annual clothing drive. But there are some things that we're really looking at being more intentional. We've been working lately with a project called Community of Caring and Sharing, which is kind of an outreach and extension from the University of Kentucky. We're doing some things with their health area to impact our community. So we've been doing some things in that magnitude to try and really be more intentional in being involved in our community, not just present, but actually presently
much beyond
involved.
the 4 walls of the building.
We have to be. I think ministry for this day and era of keeping in touch with a theologian by the name of Brian Stone, Evangelism After Christendom, says in this day and era and time, the church must give those whom they hope to reach, something they can touch, feel, and smell. So ministry has to be tangible. So one of the things we've been working on lately is really turning the corner to being really a church that's intentional about doing that as part of our evangelistic model to our immediate congregation.
I suppose in days past, the community came to the church to an extent.
Yes.
But in 2018, the church has to go to the community.
Has to.
To carry out the gospel.
Has to. It is a must. And that's been primarily what we've been addressing as a congregation. Probably, I would probably say over the last 3 years or so, really embracing that perspective that we are in a different time. We're in a different culture. And some would say we're in a post-Christendom or post-church or post-Christian period for that matter, depending on how some people may want to define that. So with that being the case, people aren't just knocking down the doors of the church anymore. Right. So the church really has to be, if the church is to grow and to have an impact, it must truly embrace the Great Commission and really do the going.
On your church's website, your ministerial objective is described. What is that objective, and how does it impact your role as the pastor of the church?
If memory serves me correctly, I think that a ministerial objective is to preach and teach the Word of God with power and conviction and simplicity, with a credible character. I believe is pretty much the ministerial objective, and that's important. I think as senior pastor, as lead teacher and preacher of our congregation, I want to make sure that my preaching. I want to make sure I believe what I'm preaching, so I must preach with conviction. Right. People know whether you're serious about what you're saying and whether you embrace it or not. And so I definitely want to preach with and teach with conviction. I love teaching. My congregation will tell you, even though I like preaching, that they say I get a lot more joy out of the teaching aspect of it. But also with simplicity. I think we want to make sure that our congregation understands the Word of God, and how, not just understand it, but understand how it really applies to my life and my daily living. How does that ancient text still have richness for me in my life today? And so I feel that is very important. But not only just teaching it with simplicity, but I've got to live it. I think one of the things we take from Jesus, the master teacher, is that he didn't just teach it, he walked it, he lived it. And I think it's important for us, for me as a pastor, to give that example for my congregation, to show them how I'm living the biblical mandate out in my family life, and just regular day-to-day life, and also how that impacts and relates to how, if I'm asking the church to be more evangelistically minded, how am I reflecting that in my pastoral role as pastor. So I believe that, again, the character is part of, is right in connection with the actual presentation. It can't be a compartmentalization of the preaching and the living. I think they have to go hand in hand to be successful in pastoral ministry. To some extent, in the church today, we face a dilemma in preaching and teaching the gospel. We live in a post-Christian, post-church, whatever term we want to use, world. Bottom line is, where the Christian faith is no longer the norm. Even in Campbellsville, Kentucky, it may be the largest faith group, but it's not the norm of the community as it may have been, or at least we claimed it to have been at one point, a generation or two ago. How do we share that gospel, but doing it in a simple manner? The word you used in your objective was simple. In other words, how can we explain it and teach it in a culture where no longer the churchy words and the theological terms, are no longer the norm? I mean, words like sanctification and justification, and terms that you and I might use just in casual conversation, but to those out there who haven't grown up in the church or been in the church, some haven't even much more than heard about Jesus in the community. How do we make it relevant to today's world without watering it down? I think one of the ways is truly, I want to go back to giving people something they can feel touch, and smell. So just the simplicity of the touch. One of the things, one of my colleagues in ministry, I don't recall who I've actually heard say that, said people really don't care what you know until you know that they care. And I think it was Dr. Akins, who's former moderator of the General Association.
Yes.
And I've always taken that to heart. So before you can get to the relevancy of presenting the gospel, if you will, even just crossing the barrier of making the connection, letting people see that you love them and care for them as a person, as one who has the imago Dei, the image of God within them. They are valued and loved. And so just making those basic communication connections, if you will, making the basic connection, I think that sets this tone and the stage for being able to share the gospel message, which is the good news that God loves you just like he loves me.
This culture they see through hypocrisy pretty quickly, don't they? I mean, in other words, if you don't live and live and believe what you speak and share, they're going to figure it out pretty quickly.
Very quickly. That goes back to one of the reasons my ministerial objective is that which it is. You have to be real, and you have to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk. And if not, you're correct. People understand whether you're being genuine or whether you're being condescending or whether you're being for real or whether you're not for real. Or as my daughter would say, you got to keep it 100. You got to be real about what it is that you're doing and mean it. And people are able to tell whether you genuinely care. Right. Care about them and love them. Yeah.
Your church has a stated mission of becoming the church in the community for the hearts of the community.
Yes.
What are some of the ways first of all, what does that mean in your from your heart, and then what are some of the ways you're working toward fulfilling that commitment?
Actually, I want to tie that back to, 'cause that's a historical statement for our congregation.
Excellent.
That statement actually was with the congregation for a number of years when the congregation was located in its historic location on Short and Dewey's, on the corner of Short and Dewey's in downtown Lexington. It was the church in the heart of the city for the hearts of the city. But when they moved from the downtown location into an urban context, that's when the church changed it from being the church in the community for the hearts of the community, because they were in a community context. And so for me, it actually sets the tone for my pastoral objective and mission with First African. My first Sunday there, as I was preaching, I was preparing to preach for my very first sermon there as the newly called pastor. I remember the two pre-sermonic selections that I don't remember those selections because during that time, the Lord was actually ministering to me as I was looking at the front of the bulletin. On the front of the bulletin, it had the church's name in big letters: First African Baptist Church, west of Allegheny Mountains. It had a big, had the church's founding date from 1790 and what the current year was, and then it had a picture of the church. But then, right in small letters up under the picture of the church, it had that church saying, "The church in the community for the hearts of the community." And the Lord convicted me there and said, "That's your ministerial mission. That's your pastoral goal, to turn that little slogan from a slogan into a reality of the church." And so we've been working from that day to truly become the church in the community for the hearts of the community, meaning we want to be a church that everyone in the community is welcome to come to. We want to be able to do what we can to minister the love of Jesus Christ to our community. My predecessor wrote a book chronicling the history of the church entitled One Grain of the Salt. And so we've been kind of building off of who we are as the First African Baptist Church as being one grain of the salt, to saying now, okay, what does it mean to be that one grain in our community? What does it mean to be the salt of the earth right there in the west end of Lexington? We care about the broader Lexington area, but we also know that right there, right outside our church walls it's a community of individuals that needs to know the love of Christ, that needs to have their lives impacted, that needs the flavoring aspect of the salting nature of the church. Salt brings flavor to life. And so we're trying to be intentional about doing it. It's taken a moment to turn the corner on really embracing that, but we've embraced that wholeheartedly now, and we're actually again working on that 7-year vision model to aptly look and see what do we need to implement to really bless and be a tangible, impactful resource within the West End community of Lexington.
How does a very historic black church like First African Baptist how do you transition to a changing neighborhood, to a changing demographics, to the changing from historically African American perhaps to more diverse and multicultural neighborhood?
One of the basic things that we did, and this might sound kind of trivial, but as we begin to observe, trying to make that transition within our historical church, knowing the background of our congregation and how sound it is from a doctrinal perspective, that was really deep within our church culture. The Lord challenged me to challenge our congregation as to how did we define the church. What was the church? So part of the work we did is that we literally surveyed our congregation to see how do you define the church. And what we discovered is that primarily 80+% of the membership define the church as we as a local church, we're a body of baptized believers in Jesus Christ, which on the surface it sounds good, but when we look and we study further the idea of the church, the ecclesia, the called out, if you will, that's just the word study aspect. But you look further at that term, it's not just the body of the called out, but it's a body of the called out that is called to. So there's a mission connected to that. So when we begin to challenge our understanding of the church, the fact that we're not just a body called out, we're a body called to. So what are we called to? We're called to do missions and ministry. We're called to do the Great Commission, which means reaching everybody. So once we embrace that, then we asked ourselves the question: if Jesus says that He came for whosoever, and the great Matthew 11 text, I believe, is "Come unto me, all ye that labor." And so we challenge ourselves to ask the question: can the all really come? Can the all who is within the breadth of our community, are they really, really welcome to come? Which means no matter what your socioeconomic background is or your ethnicity, because we are seeing a change of ethnicity within our within our community, as well as socioeconomic dynamics are also changing for what the church than what it used to be in times past. So truly embracing the all can come and building an environment where all can come now says that it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from or whatever. If we are truly the church, then all must be welcome within our doors. And so
That's
we're
at the heart of the
intentional
gospel,
about being.
is it not?
It really is. It really is. It really is. So one of the things that we do to build off of that, being the church community for the Hartsey community, we accomplish that by saying we want to be a hospitable church. That's a major goal. We have four pillars: a hospitable church, a holy church, a helping church, and a healthy church. And we try to, and everything we try to do, we're trying to be intentional about hitting one of those four pillars of accomplishing our mission. So being hospitable to everybody is a major part of being who we are as a church.
At the foot of the cross, there's no room for division, is there? I mean, in terms of race, creed, color, ethnicity, even within the theological frameworks, as long as we accept certain basics of the faith.
Yes, I concur wholeheartedly. I believe that at the foot of the cross, there is something about the cross that connects us, irregardless of what our background, whoever we are, where we're from. There's something about the cross that in the cross we're all connected and united together as one in the faith.
And whether our politics are red or blue or purple.
The cross
makes no distinction.
Should connect us somehow.
Now, we're about out of time, but
yes.
I wanted to get to the General Association of Baptists of Kentucky. You're
yes.
the second vice moderator, that august group. Tell us about the General Association and some of the work that's being done there.
Okay, again, historic in its nature, 1865 at that particular point. That was coming right out of the Civil War, and there were 12 Black Baptist pastors within the state of Kentucky that said, hey, what is the greatest need for our people coming out of that era and that period, and education was it. So they came together with the objective of developing an institution of higher education, which is now currently today Simmons College of Kentucky. So that's where it began its roots. But they continue to meet together as an association. They continue to work together to this day. So we have Simmons as one objective. The second objective is the American Baptist newspaper, and our third objective is our state mission board. So under the leadership of Dr. Creighton, Bernard Creighton, he's leading us to continue to realign ourselves to those three objectives, to streamline our efforts and work, to make sure that we are doing what we want to be committed to doing, to fostering missions work, as well as the work of our newspaper as well, being one of the oldest publications nationally, and so African American publications nationally. So he's leading us to really do what we can to honor our past and yet move it forward into the future as a general association.
Dr. Creighton is a CU alum, I might add. So we're very proud of our distinguished alum.
He's one you should be very proud of.
And currently studying in our graduate theology program.
Awesome, yes.
And looking forward to his completion of that. And the General Association, as I understand, may well be the oldest Black Baptist state convention in the nation. Is that correct? Or among the oldest at least?
Among the oldest at least, yes. That is correct.
And I think I've also heard it said that it's the largest organization of the African American community in Kentucky, at least.
That is correct.
The largest group that's wholly owned, if you will, by the Black citizens of the state.
That is correct. Yes.
We're out of time. I, as always, enjoy our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes,
and we wish you a very blessed Thanksgiving and joyous Christmas.
Likewise. Thank you.
This is John Chowning for Dialogue on Public Issues, thanking our guest today, Dr. Nathl Moore, and wishing all of you a joyous and blessed Thanksgiving.